Okay, well, brilliant. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining me this evening. As you know, my name is Katrin, and tonight I will discuss what we can learn about astronomy through philately. And I will show you some examples of what stamps exist globally celebrating the subject of astronomy. And here we have a perfect example of an astronomy-themed stamp. It was issued by the United States Postal Service in 2017 to celebrate the total solar eclipse that was seen in the United States. And it was the first total solar eclipse seen along a very narrow path across the US since 1918. It's actually one stamp, but the design is made of thermochromic ink, which means that when heat is applied, the color changes. So you can see here on the left-hand side, the moon is obscuring the sun, and you can see the sun's corona around the edges, which is the outermost part of the sun's atmosphere. And when heat is applied to the stamp by pressing a thumb or finger on it, the full moon appears, which you can see here on the right-hand side. And this is actually a real photograph of a total solar eclipse taken in Libya in 2006. So the world of stamp collecting is a science and an art in itself, and there are so many facets of the subject. So this is just a brief introduction. I did have to cut it down. I was asked to keep it to an hour because usually it's about 80 minutes long. I could talk for a week. So I've just chosen some subjects that I hope will interest you all, get you excited, and give you a flavour of what it's all about. Okay, so just to give you a quick overview of the talk, I'll be talking what I think is so great about philately. There's a quick slide about astronomy, what is it? Then I'll be giving you an introduction into astronomy and philately, and then the world's first astronomy stamps. Then I'll take a look at the global spread of astronomy on stamps and astronomy stamps issued in the UK. Then I will look at assembling an astronomy and space themed collection, which I'm sure Margaret Morris recognises, and then how to get started in collecting astronomy stamps. Okay, so what's so great about philately? Well, it's a really unusual and creative way of learning about history, geography, science, culture, politics, even animals, and comic books, and of course, astronomy and space. There is literally a stamp for everything. So just to give you a few examples, I'm sure you all have seen many of these stamps before. We have a stamp here issued in Egypt in 1986 depicting hieroglyphs. In the UK in 2001, the Royal Mail issued a set of 4 stamps celebrating the British weather. And there are even stamps with a dinosaur theme, which is a really interesting branch of thematic philately called paleophilately. And we have a stamp here issued in Switzerland celebrating chemistry, and again, another fascinating branch of thematic philately called chemophilately. And a set of 4 stamps here issued in 2019 celebrating hip hop culture in the US. And I found this quote on the internet, which I thought summed up the hobby really well. Stamp collecting is so much more than a hobby. It's a lifestyle, a community. And it is a lifestyle for me now, you know, writing about it and studying, and the community that I'm part of online is brilliant. And I've made some fantastic connections. And I think the hobby is really enjoying a boom right now. And thanks to social media, you know, it's kind of becoming really popular amongst younger people again, thanks to Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, for example. So just to give you an example of some of these guys out there on social media, on the left here, we have the punk philatelist. He has a blog about stamps, and he believes that they are a vibrant expression of pop culture. And this chap here in the middle, Graham Beck, he has his own YouTube channel called Exploring Stamps, and he's exploring the world one stamp at a time. And my friend here, John Simper, he has his own kind of monthly subscription on Patreon, I think it's called, where you can subscribe to different tiers, and he will send you a monthly kind of package every month, depending how much you're paying, and he can send you stamps and first day covers and whatnot. And yeah, you know, it's a real kind of fantastic way to escape and unplug from the real world. And for me, it's a way to research and learn subjects, and I love to promote both disciplines. Okay, so just a quick slide on astronomy. What is it? Well, it's the branch of science which deals with celestial objects, space, and the physical universe as a whole. And I'm sure that when we've all looked at the night sky, we've viewed constellations, planets, and comets with the naked eye. And many of you may have a telescope and observe galaxies and nebula. Maths, physics, and chemistry are used to explain their origins, for example, orbits of the planets, star formation, and the composition of nebula, which are composed of dust, hydrogen, and helium. And astronomy dates back to the Babylonians, the Greeks, and observers in the Middle East and China, and I'll touch briefly on this later. So professional astronomy is split into observational and theoretical branches. And observational astronomy is focused on acquiring data from observations of astronomical objects. And the main source of information about these celestial bodies and other objects is visible light, or more generally, the electromagnetic radiation. And theoretical astronomy is orientated towards the development of computer or analytical models to describe astronomical objects and phenomena. And these two fields then complement each other. So theoretical astronomy seeks to explain observational results, and observations are used to confirm theoretical results. And of course, we have cosmology, which is a separate branch of astronomy, and again, has appeared on stamps. It is a scientific study of the origin, evolution, and eventual fate of the universe. Okay, so astronomy and philately. Well, philately is a great way to learn about astronomy and other branches of the subject through postal history, cancellations, the stamps and covers. And it's also the collection, appreciation and research activities on stamps and other philatelic products, such as Cinderella stamps, poster stamps, space mail, astrophilately, which is called astrophilately, sorry. And this can tell us a lot about astronomy, the history of spaceflight, astronauts, animals in space, black holes, the list is endless. So Cinderella stamps, I'm sure you've all heard of these. These are virtually anything resembling a postage stamp, but they haven't been issued for postal purposes by government postal administration. For example, Scout Post stamps. I just wanted to show these two examples of space-themed Cinderella stamps. So this image here on the left, this is the Solar System Rocket Service stamps, a really interesting Cinderella issue produced by Broadway Approvals, who were based in Denmark Hill, London. And they advertised in boys' comics from 1955 till the 1970s. And you may notice, or not, because the image might not be quite large enough, but the perforations aren't actually perforations at all. They're just tiny little ink dots. And this little stamp here on the right-hand side, on May 5th, 1961, NASA Project Mercury astronaut Alan Shepard, aboard his Freedom 7 capsule powered by a Redstone booster, became the first American in space, and his suborbital flight lasted 15 minutes and 28 seconds. And this stamp was issued by AMVETS, or the American veterans, to celebrate this event. And this is a great example of an astronomical error. Thanks to Margaret for providing this image. It's a stamp issued in Czechoslovakia in 1967. And you can see here the image has been blown up from the little box on the left-hand side. And the engraver of the stamp has mixed up two letters of the alphabet so that constellations Lepus and Lupus are transposed. And with the growing celebration of space and astronomy through philately, some covers made it beyond our atmosphere into space aboard shuttles or Apollo missions. And the Apollo 15 postal cover incident, for example, is notorious. Unknown to NASA, the crew of Apollo 15, Al Worden, David R. Scott, and James B. Irwin agreed to carry 400 unauthorized postmark covers aboard the spacecraft and subsequently onto the surface of the moon. And upon the astronauts' return, the covers were postmarked again aboard the recovery ship Okinawa, and Hermann Seeger, the German stamp dealer involved in the plan, sold some of the covers for prices in the thousands. And when news of the flown covers reached NASA, the astronauts were reprimanded and forbidden to fly in space ever again. So if you ever see this on eBay or at a local auction for a couple of quid, buy it because it's worth quite a lot of money. And I thought this was quite interesting recently. I'm sure you will know that the 1 cent magenta was bought by Stanley Gibbons back in June. And I contacted Sotheby's in New York to ask for a catalogue of the auction because, you know, I thought, gosh, when am I going to kind of ever see the stamp being auctioned off again? Now it's, you know, it might not happen in my lifetime. And yeah, when it came, I was leafing through the pages and I thought this was a very interesting page. And this Comet ink stamp here that you can see at the top kind of jumped out at me. So it's very common for people who own the 1 cent magenta to sign the back of the stamp or mark the back of the stamp. And the infrared photography was used to bring these kind of markings, you know, up so that we could see them really quite sharply. And yeah, and I noticed this Comet stamp, and it was owned by a guy called Frederick T. Small. He was an Australian stamp collector, and he bought the stamp back in 1940. And I've been trying to get to the bottom of why he decided to mark the 1 cent magenta, with a Comet stamp, because when I've researched him, it's quite clear that he has no connections with astronomy. So yeah, I just thought it was kind of a really interesting like crossover between an astronomy and philately. And if anyone knows the answer to why he chose that marking, please let me know. So we all know it's not just about stamps. That's not just what collectors are interested in. Philatelists like to collect first day covers, which is a postage stamp on a postal card or stamped envelope franked on the first day the stamp is authorized for use. And the stamps are affixed to specially designed envelopes, often with the design of the theme that's being celebrated. And of course, we also like to collect post office headquarter cards, and some of us are really kind of focused on collecting cancellations and special hand stamps. So this is a really interesting first day cover. It was issued in 2018 in Canada to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. And the stamp on the left shows the Milky Way, which was photographed in Bruce Peninsula Park, Ontario. And on the right-hand side, we have the Northern Lights, which were photographed over Churchill, Manitoba. One of my probably favorite covers. I really love this cover. It's so colorful and, very kind of just a great illustration of the solar system. This was issued in 2002 by the Royal Mail. And yeah, it's just a great example of a fantastic decorative first day cover. And the PHQ cards. I'm sure you're familiar with these. They're just postcard sized images of the stamps that have been issued. And this set of 5 that were issued in 2002 celebrating astronomy. It was the miniature sheet was included on one of those above. And the hand stamps are cancellations alone of interest to some collectors, and for some astronomy philatelists, there's some wonderful hand stamps available. And these are simply ink stamps used to cancel the stamp, so they can't be reused, and they come in a variety of shapes and sizes, pictures and ink color. And I think, imaginative hand stamps are really eye-catching, and they form an important part of the cover. And the stamps on the covers, they can be cancelled with the usual first day of issue date stamp at a post office, but often people will send the covers away, which I'm sure we've all done, to a special hand stamp centre to have these stamps cancelled with a special pictorial design, which adds to the theme of the cover. And they're often stamped with a picture and the location of something or someone relevant to the stamps. And sometimes you can get up to 40 pictorial cancels for one set of issue of stamps. And people who collect mainly for the postmarks and cancellations, they're called markophilists, and markophily is obviously the collection of those hand stamps. So we have this really interesting pictorial hand stamp for the Space Science issue in 2012. And bottom right here, we have this lovely 50th anniversary of Man on the Moon hand stamp. And I really like how they substituted the 0 for the astronaut's footprint. And not all postmarks are produced to correspond with the first day issue of a stamp, for example. So here we have a brilliant cancellation commemorating Comet Bennett in the middle in 1970. And it's perihelion on the 20th of March, 1970. And on the left there, in November 2018, a postmark was produced to celebrate InSight, a robotic lander landing on Mars. So I think this is a really interesting example, actually, of when the stamp and the postmark have absolutely nothing to do with each other. So the a stamp wasn't issued to commemorate this event, but a postmark was produced. And can you sign my cover, please? This is something I say a lot. Autographs from eminent scientists and astronomers form a really special part of my collection. I have autographs ranging from Dr. Alan Chapman, Ian Ridpath, who's a chairman of the Aerospace Stamp Society, and I have Jim Al-Khalili, he's a famous theoretical physicist. Most recently, Chris Lintott and Pete Lawrence from the Sky at Night, they kindly signed this first day cover for me, and Dame Jocelyn Bell Burnell. And it's quite easy to get in touch with these people. I just kind of email them and say, please, will you sign this if I send you, a stamp and an envelope to return it? And everyone's just been so nice. No one's said no yet. So quite pleased about that. And the cover here, this shows an envelope celebrating John Glenn, the first American in space. I'm not sure if this is an authentic handwritten signature. It could be an auto pen. And an auto pen is a device used for the automatic signing of a signature or autograph. And they're often used when celebrities or famous people get hundreds of letters each day. So yeah, like when, the Apollo missions got really big and the astronauts couldn't spend the time signing every single piece of kind of mail that came to them. So a lot of them were signed with an auto pen. And there's a really interesting website called the Astronaut Autopen Guide on the internet. It's a really fantastic resource to check if any covers you have signed by astronauts are genuine or not. Okay, so all of this is great, but what can all of these 4 pieces of philatelic information teach us about astronomy? So if you remember, I said it's about researching the stamps and the dates, and here is an example of all 4 elements coming together. So the stamps, the postmark, signature, and the cachet, which is the illustration on the left-hand side of an envelope. On the first day cover, it can unravel a factual account about an astronomical event, such as the centenary of general relativity. So here we have the first day cover. You can see the stamps are affixed, there's a postmark, signatures, and a cachet. So each stamp showcases work of Einstein and Hawking. We have Albert Einstein, Stephen Hawking, gravitational waves, Hawking radiation, 2 black holes colliding, and a black hole. And a silver postmark was used to cancel the stamps on the 1st of July 2016, the date the stamps were issued. And the cachet tells us what the stamps are celebrating. It also tells us they were launched at Starmus 2016, which is an international festival focused on celebrating astronomy. And the cover has been autographed by famous astrophysicist Professor Kip Thorne and Professor Bernard Schutz. And I was lucky enough to meet Professor Kip Thorne in October in 2019 at a lecture at Cardiff University. He just opened a new physics laboratory at the university and he delivered a talk. And Bernard Schutz was there too. And I just recently interviewed Bernard actually for the Royal Astronomical Society magazine. And Kip Thorne was Bernard Schutz's supervisor when Bernard was doing his PhD. So it's really nice that they've kept in touch all these years, and it was great to meet them both together and get them to sign my cover. So I think this is just a really great example of what philately can teach someone about astronomy. For example, if I was to pass this cover to someone who knew little about general relativity or cosmology, they could take this away and do hours of research looking at the details on the stamps. Who are these people? What's general relativity? What's Starmus? What's a black hole? So yeah, you could just be sent down a rabbit hole really of looking up all the information on a first day cover. And I just wanted to focus in on these stamps because I think they're absolutely fantastic and they're just so beautifully produced. So these images are printed on iridescent foil, which really makes them unique and eye-catching. And I had great fun researching these because my knowledge of cosmology isn't great. So it's really interesting to delve deep to find out what the words and even the diagrams meant. So here we have Albert Einstein and his famous forgotten it, equation of special relativity. We have Stephen Hawking here and the famous Birkenstein-Hawking equation. And on the right, we have the famous trousers diagram representing 2 black holes colliding. The bottom left here, we have Hawking radiation. And this diagram was actually based on a blackboard sketch, which was sent to the designers of the stamps from Cambridge University. So that's really interesting. We have an image of a black hole here. And here we have an image of gravitational waves. Okay, so you might all be wondering, well, where did it all start? What was the world's first astronomy stamp? Well, the world's first astronomy themed stamp was issued in Brazil in 1887. It issued a perforated stamp, buff and blue in colour, depicting Crux Australis, which is the Southern Cross, an asterism of the constellation Crux, seen in the Southern Hemisphere. And here it is. And the asterism is astronomically accurate on the stamp, with Acrux and Gacrux pointing the way to the south celestial pole, and it's illustrated as if the observer were looking up to the sky from Earth. And stars are really, they're a really symbolic part of the Brazilian flag. They represent the constellations in the Southern Hemisphere, and they show how they were seen from Rio de Janeiro during the early hours of the morning of the 15th of November, 1889, the day the country shifted from an empire to a republic. So you can see that the Southern Cross constellation is a really important part of their history and culture. So it's understandable that it would really, it would feature heavily on stamps. And as you will see over the next few slides, the Southern Cross was a favorite to print on Brazilian stamps for almost 10 years, with the color and size of the stamp evolving over that time. So the world's second astronomy stamp, well, that was issued in Brazil again. 3 years later, in 1890, they issued a further series of perforated postage stamps featuring the Southern Cross, this time in a variety of colors and values, which you can see here top right. And then the asterism featured for a second time in 1890, but this time on perforated newspaper stamps So these are stamps that were used to pay for the cost of mailing newspapers or periodicals. And for this design, the asterism was illustrated shining above the Sugarloaf Mountain, Brazil's world famous landmark. So you might just be able to make out the asterism here. I don't know if you can see my pointer actually. It's just in the circle between the words, and then just under the letter A of Journeys, if that's how you pronounce it, you can just see the Sugarloaf there. And then these stamps were issued again in 1898 when Brazil, well, they reissued the stamps as newspaper surcharge stamps, and they were overprinted with the year and stamp value. And the term surcharge in philately describes any type of overprint that alters the price of a stamp. And surcharges raise or lower the face value of existing stamps when prices have changed too quickly to produce an appropriate new issue, or simply to use up surplus stocks. So you can see that here, bottom right, the overprint there, the date. And the star appears. So Venus the Morning Star appeared on a set of stamps issued in Brazil in 1894, and is the first stamp featuring a planet. And these stamps are known as Madrugada Republicana, the Republican Dawn, and they commemorate the beginning of the Republican period. As I mentioned earlier, on the 15th of November 1889, a group of military officers known as Republican Dawn overthrew Emperor Dom Pedro II, with the fall of the monarchy taking place around 8 AM that day. And research of astronomical charts has shown that Venus was visible in the morning sky at the time of the fall of the monarchy, affirming that the bright star on the stamp is undoubtedly Venus. So the Southern Cross in reverse. Well, jumping ahead to the 20th of June 1930, the 4th Pan-American Congress of Architects was held in Rio de Janeiro, and to commemorate this event, 3 stamps were issued, including this 300 wreath stamp illustrating the Southern Cross above the Sugarloaf, with the addition of 2 columns or architrave in the foreground. And if you compare this image to the previous stamps that have been issued, you will notice that the asterism is a mirror image of its true self. Well, why was this? Well, the mirror image of the asterism on the 1930 stamp was perhaps illustrated as if the observer were looking down on the celestial sphere from above, as sailors and astronomers would have done when using an armillary sphere or astrolabe for navigation. And if you're unfamiliar with an armillary sphere, then here's one on a stamp that was issued in Nicaragua, in 1985, celebrating return of Halley's Comet. And after all, the Southern Cross is depicted in reverse on the flag, and an astrolabe features on the Empire of Brazil flag, again tying in with Brazil's nautical history. I'm not entirely sure why the illustration of the Southern Cross was changed at this particular time on the stamp. And again, if anyone knows, please let me know. So the astronomical theme slowly spread to other countries. In 1930, Italy issued a stamp depicting aeroplanes and the Southern Cross, which you can see quite clearly. In 1941, Norway issued a stamp depicting fishing boats with the aurora in the background. And the 50th anniversary of the Mizusawa Latitude Observatory featured on a stamp issued in Japan in 1949. Ecuador issued a stamp in 1949 illustrating the equatorial line monument marking the position of the equator. And in 2009, San Marino issued a stamp celebrating International Year of Astronomy. And in 1970, Poland issued a stamp celebrating space exploration. And in 1981, the USA issued a stamp illustrating the Hubble Space Telescope. I'll just have a drink. So while countries over the world, from Colombia to Nigeria, Japan, and Russia, they celebrated astronomy and humankind's achievement in space, the UK did not start commemorating astronomy in space until much later. In 1966, the Royal Mail issued a stamp depicting a radio telescope at Jodrell Bank. It's bright yellow in colour, cost 4 pennies, and the stamp was issued within a set of 4, and each image celebrated a different aspect of British technology. And then in 1970, the Royal Mail issued a stamp commemorating the 150th anniversary of the Royal Astronomical Society. It was issued within a set of 5 stamps celebrating anniversaries in the UK. The pink in colour, the stamp depicts William Herschel holding a sketch of Uranus, which he discovered in 1781, and he was the first president of the Royal Astronomical Society. In the middle there, we've got Francis Bailey. Bailey's beads are named after Francis Bailey, and these are an arc of bright spots that are seen during a total or annular eclipse. And on the end there, we have John Herschel, William Herschel's son, and he is famous for many things, including naming 7 moons of Jupiter. And on the right here, we have Herschel's 40-foot telescope, which was built in Slough between 1785 and 1789. So again, small stamp, but you can glean a lot of information from it. Who are they? What's Herschel holding? What's the Royal Astronomical Society? How on earth do you build a 40-foot telescope? So yeah, a great example of learning about astronomy from philately. So I've chosen 5 examples of astronomy stamps issued in the UK over recent years. In 2002, the Royal Mail issued a miniature sheet of stamps celebrating British astronomy. You saw those earlier. So whilst the pictures are very attractive, unfortunately, there seems to be a lack of connection to British astronomy and astronomers because all the images here were taken using the Hubble Space Telescope. And in 1768, James Cook, he boarded the ship Endeavour in Plymouth, England, and sailed to Tahiti. The trip took around 8 months, and the purpose of this trip was to view the transit of Venus with the aim to gather astronomical information to measure the solar system. And the Royal Mail issued a set of 6 stamps in August 2018 to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the voyage. James Cook and Charles Green made drawings during their observations of the transit, and these have been used on a first-class stamp called the Endeavour Voyage, which you can see here, and they've been superimposed onto an image of the sun. And one of the most interesting details of the drawings is the black drop effect that they observed during the transit, which you can clearly see on the stamp just about there. And the stamp is also illustrated with a sextant, which was used for navigation purposes during the voyage. And one of the Millennium projects commemorated on stamps was the National Space Centre at Leicester. The centre, which has a particularly distinctive space-age building, was not finished at the time the stamp was released in 2000, so could not be illustrated, unfortunately. So the Royal Mail had to make do with a generic picture of the night sky. And in 1987, the UK's Royal Mail, again, we issued 4 stamps marking the 300th anniversary of Isaac Newton's Principia. And despite their small size, the stamps are bursting with information about Newton's accomplishments. So the 34 pence stamp, for example, bottom right, portrays a satellite along with Newton's insights on projectile motion and orbits. And the 22 pence stamp, top right, honours his study of planetary motion through the depiction of 6 planets orbiting the sun, on top of which is an impressive coronal loop. And the 50th anniversary of Patrick Moore's BBC TV programme, The Sky at Night, was commemorated by a set of 6 colourful and attractive stamps released in 2007. The designs show, for example, the Cat's Eye Nebula, the Saturn Nebula, and the Helix Nebula, and superimposed on each image is an outline of the home constellation with the location of the object marked, and all objects are identified with a number beginning with the letter C, which is their reference in Patrick's own brand Caldwell catalogue, his full surname being Caldwell Moore. And just a quickie, another piece of very interesting information I found out recently in this paper here called Adjusting Object Glasses of Refracting Telescopes. While German telescope makers have used postage stamps to actually separate the objective lenses and apochromatic telescopes, so using stamps sometimes replaced the need to use mucilage on paper or tinfoil because obviously the stamp was already gummed. And yeah, and I just thought this was a really unusual example of philately and astronomy, quite interesting. So I'm excited to read more about that if I can. Okay, so assembling an astronomy and philately collection. Well, you've probably already noticed that, I've covered everything from astronomers to telescopes to constellations. They've all appeared on stamps, and I've kind of given you a real mishmash of examples. And as you all know, there isn't much point in collecting stamps if you aren't going to learn something from them. It's why I love collecting stamps with an astronomy theme so much. Margaret Morris, back in 2013, she published a paper called Astronomy and Philately, where Margaret discussed the 2 subjects. And she grouped her collection into 3 main groups, and I think this is a really useful way of organising a philately collection within the subjects of astronomy. So I'm just going to give you a few of my own examples under each section to illustrate what subjects we can learn in astronomy from philately in an organised and logical way. So we'll be looking at the observers. So I'll be using examples of astronomers and astronomical anniversaries, such as the Royal Astronomical Society. Then we'll be looking at the observables. So I've chosen our solar system and everyone's favourite in the astronomy world, comets. And the observations. So, what were the instruments that people were using to make these observations. I've actually added my own fourth title because Margaret didn't mention it in her paper, but also because I think it's probably classed as astrophilately, so a kind of separate subject. But I didn't want to leave it out, so it's a topic we all know and love, and that's the explorers. So I'll just be looking at human exploration and achievements, so the space race and moon landing on stamps. Okay, so the observers. So we all know that astronomy is one of the oldest natural sciences, and this subject has been celebrated on stamps all over the world. Astronomy dates back to the 4th millennium BC, and Babylonian astronomers were skilled observers and mathematicians, and they studied the sky and devoted their time to studying the planetary movements and adopted the use of the zodiacal belt. And they also recorded observations of comets and eclipses, and these studies were recorded on cuneiform clay tablets. And this stamp here from Austria, issued in 1965, depicts a cuneiform clay tablet, and these tablets show a really good understanding of arithmetic, algebra, and geometry. And the Egyptians, by the 3rd millennium BC, Egyptians had already adopted a 365-day year, and annual flooding of the Nile was determined observing the stars. And the stamp here on the right-hand side depicts Hathor. It was issued in the Democratic Republic of Congo in 1964, and according to ancient myths, Hathor was a sky goddess known as Lady of Stars and Sovereign of Stars and linked to Sirius. And she was originally a personification of the Milky Way, which is considered to be the milk that flowed from the udders of a heavenly cow. And the Chinese, they've had a really long history of astronomy dating back to the 2nd millennium BC. And in a 2nd century tomb, a silk roll was found which depicts comets and is considered the first atlas of comets. And the stamp here on the left-hand side was issued in China in 1986 and commemorates the return of Halleys Comet. And you can see the images on the stamp echo the images that feature on the scroll. So yeah, so observations of celestial bodies and scientific discoveries have shaped our way of thinking about our place in the universe. So jumping ahead from the ancient observers to the scientists and astronomers who changed our view of our place in the universe over the last few centuries. Here we have Copernicus. He was a popular astronomer to feature on stamps. He is from Poland, and he proposed that the planets have the sun as the fixed point to which their motions are to be referred. And he's featured on a stamp here issued in Poland in 1942. And here he is again, featuring on a stamp issued in Hungary in 1973 to commemorate 500 years since his birth. And the stamp here on the left is a really great example of a Cinderella stamp. Tycho Brahe, he was a Danish nobleman, astronomer and writer known for his accurate and comprehensive astronomical observations. He was a real character. In fact, he had a false nose made of brass, which had been cut off during a sword fight. He formed his own system, the Tychonic system, and his system correctly saw the moon as orbiting Earth and the planets as orbiting the sun, but erroneously considered the sun to be orbiting the Earth. Johannes Kepler was Tycho's assistant. Kepler was a convinced Copernican and considered Tycho's model to be mistaken. He is also, of course, famous for his laws of planetary motion, and he was commemorated on a stamp in the Czech Republic in 2009. And the father of astronomy, Galileo. He was an astronomer, engineer, and physicist, and he is famous for his use of the telescope and making celestial observations. He observed the phases of Venus and the 4 largest satellites of Jupiter. And whilst he wasn't the first person to observe the moon, he made topographical charts estimating the heights of the mountains, and he was celebrated on a stamp issued in Ascension in 1971. And last but not least, Sir Isaac Newton. He's recognized as one of the greatest mathematicians and scientists of all time. Born in England, Newton formulated the laws of motion and made seminal contributions to optics. And he was celebrated on a postage stamp in 1987 in Grenada. And here he is illustrated holding the apple that was said to give him as inspiration to formulate the theory of gravity. So to continue with the observer's theme, on February 11th, 2020, the Royal Mail, oops, sorry, I missed the beginning bit there, but we saw this before. It's the commemorative stamp issued in 1970, celebrating the 150th anniversary of the Royal Astronomical Society. Last year, the Royal Mail issued a set of stamps to commemorate the bicentenary of the Royal Astronomical Society. The society was formed in 1820 at a tavern in London, and the society has now grown to 4,000 members and is one of the most eminent societies in the world promoting astronomy and geophysics. So this issue, you can see here, is called Visions of the Universe, It has 8 stamps in total illustrating astronomical phenomena, such as Comet 67P, the Cat's Eye Nebula. We have pulsars, Jupiter's auroras, gravitational lensing, and black holes. And each stamp includes one simple line of text that describes phenomena which has been discovered or investigated by British astronomers and astrophysicists. So for example, on the left there in the middle, the first class black hole stamp displays the text, "Black holes are superdense regions of space," and this is a nod to the English natural philosopher John Michell, who first suggested their existence in 1783, and the late famous British professor and theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking, who made predictions about their behaviours. And the stamp set was illustrated by a London-based artist called Robert Ball. You know, I think you'll agree the stamps are really colourful in hues of blue and red, and they really bring to life the amazing phenomena in a way that photographs could not. And in particular, going back to the black hole stamp again, this is based on the work of Dr. Ziri Younsi of University College London, and he was part of the Event Horizon Telescope team that captured the groundbreaking first image of a black hole in 2019. And he shared computer models of his work on black holes with Robert Ball, the illustrator of the stamps, to inform the stamps design. So I think these stamps are a really fitting celebration for the bicentenary of such a prestigious society and the contributions of British scientists to research in this field. Okay, so what have the observers been looking at? Well, our solar system is home to the sun, 8 planets, and fascinating astronomical objects, including comets, asteroids, and dwarf planets such as Pluto. And on the 16th of October 2012, the Royal Mail celebrated the 50th anniversary of the first British satellite, Ariel 1. And images of our incredible solar system featured on 6 detailed stamps. And using imagery taken from various probes, the colour and imagination were brought to life, giving us armchair astronomers a close-up view of these mysterious worlds. And again, each image has a relationship with the UK's involvement in astronomy. So the sun, for example, featuring on the first class stamp here, the fiery orange image was photographed by the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, which was a joint project between the European Space Agency and NASA. And the spacecraft actually continues to make observations of the sun's chromosphere, atmosphere, and corona, despite it initially only being a 2-year mission. And planets featuring on the stamp set include Venus and Mars. They're both the Earth's nearest neighbours, and the images chosen on the first class and 77 pence stamps are examples of how beautiful our fellow rocky planets are. And the exploration of Venus and Mars have strong UK connections. So the Venus Express mission was proposed by scientists at Oxford University, and the image taken by ESA's Mars Express probe was the first European mission to Mars, with the UK having involvement in 3 of the 6 onboard instruments. And the Earth featured on its own stamp in 1984, when the Royal Mail commemorated the 100-year anniversary of the adoption of the Greenwich Meridian, the world's prime meridian. The image chosen on this 16 pence stamp is that of Earth as seen from Apollo 11, with a curved red line of 0 longitude superimposed on top. And I'm sure many of us remember the total solar eclipse in 1999. 7 stamps were issued in that year by the Guernsey Post Office to commemorate the eclipse. And these are a fantastic set, taking the collector through the 5 stages of the eclipse, including the first and second contact, totality, and you can see Bailey's beads on the images and the diamond ring effect. 6 stamps hold a value and can be used for postage, whilst the 7th is a Cinderella stamp. Comets, everyone's favourite. So comets have been the cause of fascination and fear for centuries, originating from the cold, dark outer reaches of the solar system. They're composed of ice and rock. You can see 2 comets featuring here on an Indian, a mini sheet issued in India in 2018. And comets originate from 2 locations, the Kuiper Belt and the Oort Cloud. Comets originating from the Kuiper Belt are short period comets and can orbit the sun in less than 200 years, whereas comets originating from the Oort Cloud take much longer to orbit the sun, often thousands of years, and these are known as long period comets. So we have this fantastic shaped comet themed stamp here, issued in Finland in 2014 as part of the Signs in the Sky issue. And we have 2 comet stamps here issued in Congo in 1986, illustrating Comet Ikea-Seki, which was seen in 1965, and we have Comet West, which was seen in 1976. Halleys Comet, named after the famous astronomer Edmund Halley, or Hawley, however you want to pronounce his name. I say Halley. Halleys Comet is perhaps the most famous short period comet in our history due to its return period of 67 years. Some of us may even see it twice in a lifetime. And the comet has been recorded as far back as 240 BC in China and was embroidered into the world famous Bayeux Tapestry. And a souvenir stamp sheet issued in Bolivia in 1986 features scene 32 from the Bayeux Tapestry, and the comet can clearly be seen on the upper border. So the appearance of Halley's Comet in 1985 was celebrated globally on stamps. Here in the UK, and the Royal Mail issued a fantastic set of 4 stamps in 1986, which were illustrated by the famous cartoonist Ralph Steadman. The stamps are colourful and imaginative. They depict a rather disgruntled, a bit comical looking Halley down there on the bottom right. We have an image of 2 comets representing seeing it twice in a lifetime on the left. And we have Giotto, the spacecraft, top right, and the comet orbiting the sun. And a set of first day covers that I really enjoy collecting are those that were issued by the Presentation Philatelic Services in London between, from what I think is 1984 to 1995. And the card inlay within each cover explains that each issue depicts a fine art painting or other collectible auctioned by Sotheby's of London. So for example, the first day cover that you see here, you can see it's got the 4 Halleys Comet stamps on them. It's on the left-hand side, there was a beautiful silk cachet of a portable refracting telescope manufactured by Peter Dolland, and he was a well-known maker of optical instruments. And the telescope was actually sold by Sotheby's at auction in 1985 for £22,000. And it's 26 years this year that Hillbop was discovered. It moved across our skies for approximately 18 months. Hillbop was one of the most observed comets. It's been trumped now. With the 20th century, it was discovered independently by Alan Hale and Thomas Bopp in the US on the 23rd of July 1995, and the comet passed perihelion, which was its closest approach to Earth, on the 1st of April 1997. As far as I'm aware, there's very few stamps out there that were issued to celebrate this exciting event, but on the 1st of April 1997, the Dominican Republic issued a set of stamps depicting the comet positioned against a tropical pink and yellow sky, and you can clearly see its 2 tails of gas and dust in both images. And in my collection, I have a custom cover commemorating the comet. It was sent to me by a former NASA employee who specializes in making his own covers. The cover is postmarked at Cloudcroft, New Mexico on the 24th of March 1997, which was 2 days after the comet made its closest approach to Earth. And Cloudcroft is the location where Alan Hale first made the discovery, and the image on the cover there illustrates the position of the comet in the night sky from the date of its discovery to the date it was last observed in the southern hemisphere. And for those keen astronomers amongst us, Comet Neowise would not have passed you by last year. It was first discovered on March 27th, 2020 by the Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer, and the comet's closest approach to Earth was on the 23rd of July last year. And the comet could easily be seen with the naked eye, even in urban areas, and it is now known as one of the brightest comets since the appearance of Hillbop in 1997. And Sark in Guernsey, that was designated a dark sky island in 2011, and the 10-year anniversary is celebrated this year, and they produced a set of 6 stamps, which were issued back in June, I think, commemorating the anniversary, and included this lovely stamp featuring Comet Neowise. Okay, so the observations, the tools of the observers. How were people observing? So for thousands of years, our ancestors looked to the sky. They observed and named the stars and constellations after animals, objects, and mythological characters. And they would worship the solstices and watch the planets traversing across the sky. And all of these early attempts at recording and understanding the sky have been found on the design of stamps. So the prehistoric monument of Stonehenge in Wiltshire has long been studied for its possible connections with ancient astronomy. The site is aligned in the direction of the sunrise of the summer solstice and the sunset of the winter solstice. And archaeoastronomers have made a range of further claims about the site's connection to astronomy, its meaning and its use. And it has appeared twice on stamp issues in the UK, once in 1990 on the left there, celebrating the subject of astronomy. You can see just to the left of the image, a gyroscope, and on the right-hand side, there's a ship there navigating by the stars. And it appeared again in 2005 on a stamp celebrating World Heritage Sites. And the Nebra Sky Disk. This is a bronze disk. It's blue and golden color. It's quite small. It's only about 30 centimeters in diameter. It was found in Germany in 1999 by metal detectorists. And the symbols on the disk are interpreted generally as a sun or full moon, a lunar crescent, and stars, which include a cluster of 7 stars interpreted as the Pleiades, and 2 golden arcs along the sides, interpreted to mark the angle between the solstices, were probably added later. And a final addition was another arc at the bottom, surrounded by multiple strokes of uncertain meaning, variously interpreted as a solar barge with numerous oars, the Milky Way, or even a rainbow. And archaeologists placed the origins of the disk in the 1st millennium BCE, and the disk may have been an astronomical instrument, and it featured on a postage stamp in Germany in 2008, celebrating German archaeology. Other astronomical instruments that have been attributed to watching and recording our skies include the astrolabe and our armillary sphere, but perhaps the most of all is the telescope, which you can see here on a stamp, which was issued in Sierra Leone, commemorating the 450th anniversary of Copernicus' death. So observatories, telescopes are often housed in observatories. In 1921, the first stamp depicting an observatory was issued in central Lithuania. It's produced in 2 forms, perforate and imperforate, and the image on the stamp displays the Poxabut Observatory, named after the astronomer Martin Poxabut, famous for his observational work and for computing the orbit of Mercury. And the observatory theme continued in 1948. The United States printed their first astronomy-themed 3-cent stamp with an image of Palomar Mountain Observatory, and the stamp was issued to commemorate the observatory's opening. The observatory houses the Hale telescope, a 200-inch telescope named after George Hale, a famous American solar astronomer well known for his work on the discovery of magnetic fields in sunspots. And the reflecting telescope was the largest at the time. It launched new developments in telescope design, including its mount and mirror. And the 4th section, the final section, the explorers. From July 1957 to December 1958, scientists from 67 countries participated in various Earth science projects as part of the International Geophysical Year. And to mark this occasion, the US Post Office issued a stamp featuring a striking illustration of the sun, which was in the most active phase of its 11-year cycle, solar cycle 19, which is the 19th solar cycle since 1755. And also depicted is a section of Michelangelo's famous Sistine Chapel painting, The Creation of Adam, which is a nod to our natural curiosity and desire to understand our place in the universe. So the International Geophysical Year came at a time when the Soviet Union and the US were locked in a heated race to be the first nation to go to space. And the Soviet Union succeeded on the 4th of October 1957. Sputnik 1 was the first artificial satellite launched into low Earth orbit, and the satellite survived just under 3 months in space before falling back to Earth and burning up in our atmosphere. And the Soviet Union issued its first Sputnik stamp on the 4th of November 1957, which you can see there bottom left. The 40 kopeck perforated stamp was a simple design, blue and grey in colour, and illustrates the satellite orbiting the Earth. And the launch of Sputnik has been celebrated globally on stamps including Romania, Cuba, and Korea. And after the successful launch of Laika, the space dog, aboard Sputnik 2 on the 3rd of November 1957, there she is there, a further triumph came for the USSR in 1961 when Yuri Gagarin was launched aboard Vostok 1 and orbited the Earth for 108 minutes before he returned to Earth. And he was the first man in space and the first man to orbit the Earth. And not one to shy away from celebrating their achievements through philately, a plethora of stamps from the Soviet Union commemorating this momentous event exists, including this rather wonderful 10 kopeck stamp, a great example of Soviet space propaganda, illustrating Gagarin looking to the stars as Vostok 1 shoots off into the sky above a silhouetted skyline and the date of the launch in the rocket's wake. So whilst the Soviet Union blazed a trail into space, the USA was successful in their own first, and on the 20th of July 1969, the crew of Apollo 11 were the first to land on the moon in their lunar module, the Eagle, and Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin stepped onto the moon's surface on the 21st of July 1969. Needless to say, there was an explosion in the issue of stamps and memorabilia celebrating this milestone, and this single 10-cent stamp here, top left, was issued in September 1969, designed by Paul Halley. It was issued to celebrate this historic visit to our celestial neighbour, and it illustrates Neil Armstrong setting foot on the moon, embarking from Eagle, the lunar landing. And the engraving plates actually for the postage stamp were carried to the surface of the moon by the Apollo 11 astronauts, and it now resides in the National Postal Museum in Washington, DC. And you might be wondering who Paul Halley is. Well, he was one of the first 8 artists chosen by NASA in 1962 to document the American space program's Project Mercury. In a space art career spanning more than 40 years, Halley has covered Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, and Space Shuttle missions. And Paul was actually the only artist present with the Apollo 11 crew of Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins on the morning that they prepared to launch to the moon. And in 1989, the 20th anniversary of the moon landing, the Postal Service asked Paul's son Chris to design the $2.40 priority mail stamp, and Paul to design a first day cover for this issue. And I'm lucky enough to actually have the cover signed by Chris and Paul, so that makes a really kind of special addition to my collection. And in 1994, for the 25th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing, Paul and Chris jointly designed 2 US stamps commemorating the event. So we have on the right hand side a 29-cent commemorative stamp and a $9.95 express mail stamp just on the left there. So the past couple of years have been no exception to the issue of Apollo 11 stamps, and to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, the United States Postal Service issued 2 vertical forever stamps on the 20th of July 2019. A simple design, the images depict the iconic photograph of Buzz Aldrin taken by Neil Armstrong on the left there, and on the right you can see the Apollo 11 landing site on the moon, and the Sea of Tranquility is marked with a dot. Even the Isle of Man post office kept the Apollo theme going in 2019 with some beautiful stamps. They released a set of 8 fantastic stamps to commemorate the 50th anniversary of man landing on the moon. The One Small Step explores 50 years of lunar exploration and tells the story of the first 12 Apollo missions. And they depict famous images, including mission control at NASA, Earthwise, taken by William Anders during the Apollo 8 mission, and the first footprints on the moon. And I just love the detail of these stamps. Around the perforations are famous quotes from people involved in the missions, including President Kennedy and the astronauts from each mission. And each stamp features the map coordinates of a place relating to the theme of each stamp. So for example, here on the Project Apollo stamp, it displays the coordinates of the Rice Stadium on the bottom left, where Kennedy delivered his speech announcing the Apollo program in 1962. And just on the right-hand side there, you can see Kennedy's famous words, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade." Okay, so last slide. How do you get started in collecting astronomy stamps? Well, research on the internet is probably the easiest and cheapest thing to do. Check out auction websites such as eBay, Delcamp, Colnect, very easy to search, just type in astronomy or space or comets. And of course, astronomy stamp societies and collectors. I don't know what I'd do without, the support I've had from the guys at the Astrospace Stamp Society, the American Philatelic Society, the American Topical Association. The list is endless, but yeah, even Stanley Gibbons, I've written for them, and I have my own weekly column on the All About Stamps website. So there's a real, like I said at the beginning, a real community of people who will jump at the chance to help you and get you going. And yeah, check out books, catalogs, magazines. These books here, bottom right, are absolutely fantastic. We've got The Race to the Moon by Umberto Cavallaro and Stamping Through Astronomy by Renato Ducati. And again, these 2 guys are very helpful in my mission to, spread the word about astronomy and philately. And thank you very much for listening. I hope you're all still there.
Okay, well, thank you very much,